Cuckooing. It's ruining lives, but you've probably never even heard of it. Coined after the parasitic bird, cuckooing is the act of taking over a person's home, often using the property for criminal activity. Just like a cuckoo chick takes over a host bird's nest, the victim is left powerless, often treated as slaves or even forced to flee. People with mental health issues, learning disabilities, addiction, and the elderly are often targeted. But this can happen to anyone. Their homes can end up being used for drug trafficking, storing arms, and even sex work. But some perpetrators may also take over a property to financially ransom its occupier. So why has this harrowing practice largely gone under the radar?
It still surprises us that people don't know about cuckooing and how we can deal with it. But I suppose that's because we're working with it and we see it all the time. I think it's been around for forever, the exploitation of somebody in their home. And I think it's quite hard because it is behind closed doors.
I don't think it's necessarily recognised, and if people do think that something's not quite right, they're not quite sure what to do about it. I think that there is stigma around the people that end up being victims, and they probably think, well, I use drugs or I've got a criminal history, so people aren't going to believe me if I say anything.
I was on heroin and crack at the time. I was using that daily. They just saw the opportunity there and they asked me to stay at the flat, which I agreed to because all I wanted was the drugs. They kept me in debt with them just so they could stay there. They made sure that I knew the consequences if things didn't go their way. So yeah, I didn't really feel like I could say, look, you have to go now. And it's just a perpetual cycle and you just can't do anything about it. You don't feel like you've got an option, so you just take more and more drugs.
The government announced that cuckooing is to be criminalised under the Crime and Policing Bill, which is a huge step forward in combating this criminal activity. To give an idea of the scale of the problem, during just 1 week of intensive police action last March, almost 1,300 cuckooed addresses were visited. Numbers appear to be rising, but this is more likely to be that police and charities are just becoming more aware of the issue.
I don't think it's got any worse. I think what we've worked out is we now know what we're looking at. Everyone's vulnerable because if you've got a house or a flat or even a caravan, you could be exploited. So we have seen people in multi-million-pound houses being exploited and being cuckooed. We also see people in one-bedroom bed-sit flats being exploited. But what we've been able to say is actually your one-bed flat, you're more likely to, but just because you live in a very big house also doesn't mean to say you're not susceptible to it.
In the past, cuckooing has occurred in more rural areas outside of London, as it was believed to be closely linked with county lines drug dealing. However, that isn't always the case, and increasing numbers of cuckooed homes have been creeping closer into London. Surrey police were one of the first constabularies to recognise how widespread the practice was. In 2018, they formed a team of antisocial behaviour officers to combat cuckooing in the county. They joined up with local charity Catalyst Support so that the police could focus on the offenders, and Catalyst Support could reach out to the victims of cuckooing.
Because we work with the victims and we've seen how much devastation this can cause to people's lives. It can leave them in a really dark place, and quite often they will have the next place lined up to where to go to. So it is an ongoing business, and drug dealing is a business, and as long as you're not using the drugs yourself, it can be quite a lucrative business. And I think for the victim, if cuckooing in itself isn't a crime, they're not always seen as a victim.
I just started having a mental breakdown, started crying all the time. And they just portrayed they were drinking and getting people to wrap up drugs and started sitting glass and things like that from my home. So never allowed it, never wanted. I just couldn't do nothing about it. So months after that, I started feeling music towards me. Couldn't see the children. My thing is suspicion and abuse.
If you think about the term antisocial behaviour, which is behaviour likely to cause alarm, harassment and stress, if you then think about people that are being cuckooed in their homes, they will be alarmed, they will be distressed, they will be harassed. So by having that team of specialists, when that property is identified, when that victim is identified, we can use the antisocial behaviour tools and powers that we have to safeguard those individuals and also the surrounding community that will have been impacted by the people at that address.
From the success of the project, Surrey Police are now working with surrounding constabularies to help replicate the same model in other counties. Justice and Care, a charity that was established to fight against modern slavery, has spent the last several years campaigning to criminalise cuckooing.
And its research from the Centre for Social Justice and Justice and Care highlighted that despite the terrible impact on victims taking control of persons' home in this way, it's not specifically a crime. And a specific offence of cuckooing is therefore needed to rectify the harm done.
They had finally made some headway in May 2024 when the previous government announced they would amend the Criminal Justice Bill to make cuckooing a criminal offence. However, just 1 week later, Rishi Sunak called the next general election, leaving the amendment to fall by the wayside.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Under a new Labour government, cuckooing is once again on the road to being criminalised.
So the campaign started in 2021 when I received a call from some police officers and we were discussing issues around modern slavery investigations and prosecutions, and they raised the issue that CPS won't prosecute for cuckooing under the Modern Slavery Act, that it didn't fit the definition. We were quite surprised because what is it if not exploitation when somebody else's property is taken over, their life is taken over, they live in fear, they're threatened. Yes, they may not be forced to do something and be exploited in that way, but still their life is completely on hold.
People rarely like to think of themselves as vulnerable or being taken advantage of, so they may not admit to being cuckooed. Unexpected noise, people coming and going at all hours of the day, the property in disrepair, these are all signs of a cuckooed home. The person cuckooing isn't necessarily a stranger. This can happen with friends and family members, which often makes it harder to separate the victim from the perpetrator.
We feel that it's really important to see people in their homes to get a true picture of what's going on, because it could be that, you know, if you ring up a friend and say, oh, hi, how are you? And they say, oh, I'm absolutely fine, thank you. But if you went round there, you'd see that maybe they haven't got out of bed for a couple of days because they've not been feeling too good, they're washing up, stacked up. So you get that true picture of what's going on. And we feel that's what's important with these clients. You need to go and see. They might say that nothing's happening, and then you see that actually there's a duvet down the side of the sofa. So then you could question, well, to me that looks like somebody else might be staying here, and things like that. So we try to see people as soon as possible because it's really important to get that support in place. We need to build up people's resilience to prevent it from happening again.
All in all, we are very pleased to see the Crime and Policing Bill will introduce cuckooing as a separate criminal offence, and we also hope that being a crime means that police will be recording data and we will have a better understanding of the scale of the crime in this country. And we're also very happy that it's going to be applicable not just in England and Wales, but it will also be an offence in Scotland and Northern Ireland. By no means it's the end, it's the beginning, but again, a significant milestone for us.
I find it maddening that this kind of exploitation has largely gone unnoticed by the general public. Up until a few months ago, I hadn't even heard of the term, let alone could conceive that something like this has been happening. The cuckooing offence will carry a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison, which is an important milestone towards protecting the UK's most vulnerable people.